Hey everybody, and welcome back to some more Oxygen Not Included. We're back once again with the Impenetrable Gang. It's cycle 750. We're 3/4 of a way to 1,000 cycles. That is insane. And between episodes, I've spent quite a bit of time reorganizing the base a little bit, adding down some more wallpaper, trying to make the base look a little bit nicer, adding in a couple new pieces of artwork and a couple new statues rounded about in a few places, and also kind of changing the walling a little bit. Like this bottom right hand area was a little bit of a mess before, and it is still kind of a little bit of a mess. There's still like this that doesn't need to be here. Now we can get rid of that. There's stuff like these algae distillers that are just sitting there now with no purpose. But I went around and I tried to tidy things up a bit, get rid of pipes that are not necessary, get rid of electrical wires that are not necessary, move, machines and stuff that are not necessary anymore, and try and make it just a little bit more symmetrical, a little bit cleaner, and just a little bit nicer to look at. And I think it is. I think it's a little bit nicer to look at than it was previously, but that is not what we're going to work on in today's episode. Today, we have got to work on trying to cool down our space setup over here. We got to make sure that this setup doesn't end up in the situation that it's in right now, because right now our telescope is broken, our solar panels are broken, we don't have any space scanners, the doors don't open because we don't have any space scanners, and our rubber miners are slowly but surely increasing in temperature until the point that they finally break because they hit that 275-degree overheat temperature for steel. And so I'm going to tear down pretty much everything here. We can cancel these space scanners. We can schedule digs on pretty much all of this stuff here. And I'm also going to go ahead and just delete everything above this window tile here, because pretty much all of that is going to go, and we're going to work on a fresh, new, hopefully sustainable system for deleting the regolith that comes from the meteors and simultaneously cooling down the rubber miners that overheat due to said regolith. That's the plan, at least. Before we get into that, though, one thing that we do definitely need to work on is our steel production, because right now we have got 395 kilograms of steel, which is not a whole lot. It's not a huge deal because we do have a lot of steel up here. As we start to dig all of this stuff up, we should get quite a bit of steel back. You can see we're already starting to gain steel there. And so replacing all this shouldn't be too difficult. But if we want to put more stuff down, if we want to build more things out of steel, we're definitely going to need more than 600 kilograms. And so the reason we're not generating steel right now is twofold. One of the reasons is that we are down to our last 10 kilograms of lime, so we do need to go and dig out some more fossils. Thankfully, there are quite a few over here. I don't think it matters too much if this oil spills out onto the floor. What does matter, though, is that we throw down a couple of ladders here just to allow our duplicates to actually get up and mine all of that fossil. That should work out just fine. And then the second problem is that we don't actively have any way of cooling our metal refinery, and so currently they actually just can't make steel. Even if we had all of the resources required, they can't make it because we do not have any oil being made. Now, originally, my plan was to put down an oil well onto this oil reservoir and start producing oil that way, and that still is my plan in the long term, but to do that, we need 1,000 grams per second of water to pump into that oil reservoir. And I was going to do that using our steam vent that we were using in the last episode to generate steam for our rocket. Now, between episodes, I was going to set up a replica of this setup that we have down here to start turning all of the steam from this cool steam vent into water that we could then use in the oil well. But unfortunately, there was a ton of water, and is still a ton of water in this area here. And so right now, we're slowly but surely pumping all of that water out of here right round into this large tank. Originally, I was hoping I could store it in just a few liquid reservoirs, but I drastically underestimated just how much water there was here, or maybe I overestimated how much water a liquid reservoir could hold. Nevertheless, we're currently pumping all of this water over into here, and once all that water's gone, then we can start getting rid of the polluted oxygen, making a vacuum and trying to get all of this steam, turn it into water, and pump it down for our oil well. But while we wait for that to happen, real quick, somebody has made a mess. Are you trapped? You are indeed trapped. Okay, real quick, we'll dig that out as well. That's the problem with working with regolith that's not automated. They can't get anywhere when they get stuck. Thankfully, they can now get out, which is good. But temporarily, what I think I'm going to do is move this liquid pump, and by move the liquid pump, I mean leave this liquid pump here, but put a new liquid pump down over here so we can start tapping into this body of oil. It should take our duplicates quite a few cycles to process all of that and use it all in the metal refinery, and hopefully by that time we will have what it takes to start using that steam vent and turning all that steam into water for the oil well. So don't want to do that. I want to go straight across like so. And then we do want to make sure that this does go through the water filter here. If it doesn't go through the water filter, then this, actually, maybe it doesn't have to go through the water filter now that I think about it, because this water here is never going to make it over to there. And so you know what? Real quick, instead what we'll do is we'll just have this liquid pipe go straight across and into the pre-existing oil line, and that should be just fine. Now, this is currently an unreachable dig. That is fine. We will deconstruct our pitcher pump. We will also deconstruct some of this tile here, and we'll also go ahead and throw down a couple more ladders right about there. That should allow them to get all the way down there to actually build that liquid pump, and that should get our steel production back online. So, back at the top here, for now, we're just going to leave these bunker doors shut. We're going to let them stay there for the time being until we have our new system up and running. Real quick, I would like a new window tile right about there just to fill in the floor. I'm pretty happy with the bunker door here. I think this is going to work just fine. The idea here is still the same, that the regolith is going to fall down onto hopefully a closed bunker door, and then rubber miners are going to break it, and then once all of the regolith is broken, then the bunker doors will open, and the telescope will once again be able to do its work with the vastness of space. We do also want to delete this as well, if possible. Is that like not deletable? Oh no, it is scheduled to be deconstructed. It just didn't show the icon for whatever reason. But essentially, my plan here is to actively cool the rubber miners using liquids and also using some more thermo aqua tuners. So my plan is to do something like this, and let me do a little bit of counting here. We're going to have a rubber miner right about here. And then above that rubber miner, we're going to have some tile. I'm going to use insulated tile just because it's very slow to heat up. Although, in fairness, I don't think it really matters too much which kind of tile we use. Hopefully, this doesn't start building things everywhere. It didn't, thank goodness. There was a weird bug. I don't know if it's still there, where you saw it before if you've watched all the episodes. It would just kind of build in a massive area or build in a big diagonal if you were building when the game auto saved. Thankfully, it doesn't seem to be the case right now. But then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. And then essentially, we're going to have our rubber miners underneath like this. And just like before, these rubber miners are set up in such a way that they can mine the top of the adjacent rubber miners. So this guy can mine these 2 blocks up here, and also these 2 blocks up here. And then this guy, because obviously once we build this tile, this rubber miner is not going to be able to dig above it. And that's why this guy can dig up here. And then this guy can dig up here, thus clearing the whole area for all of our rubber miners. And that does mean that we would have to not have bunker doors here if we were going to do that, because we wouldn't want stuff falling here. But thankfully, what we can do is 1, 2, 3, 4. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And if we put another rubber miner right about there, we should be able to cover the same thing. And at that point, then we would just have 2 bunker tiles here and here, covering up this bit so that neither of these 2 tiles ever have regolith on them, because we just wouldn't be able to get rid of it. I do see real quick that my stress is quite high. May is hungry. I'm not quite sure why she's hungry. Give me the follow cam. Hopefully she's going to eat right about now. Also, the reason why this is always full, by the way, of polluted water is because if a duplicant makes a mess while they're in their exosuit, the mess stays in the suit until they land back at the exosuit docks, at which point they take the suit off and the polluted water spills out all over the floor. And so that's why so often there is polluted water on the floor here, and it's not great because all of our duplicants come here and stand in it all of the time, and it definitely is not helping with our stress levels. Thankfully, food-wise, we seem to have things pretty much under control at this point. We're now up at 250,000 kilocalories there, which is fantastic, and it still seems to be growing up as well. I did put down another refrigerator between episodes so we can actually store all of the food that we're getting, and this one is slowly but surely filling up with yet more stuffed berries, which is fantastic. But back over here, the way this is going to work is using a coolant, right? We're going to have, I think petroleum is what we're going to use along the bottom of the floor here. And then we're going to use coolant pipes to actually cool down that petroleum, and use a thermo aqua tuner to cool down that coolant pipe, if that makes sense. So essentially, let me go get another window tile here, because we need to go and put down an actual end to this. I might go 1 more out, like put down 1 more rubber miner. If we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, we can actually put down 1 more rubber miner right about here. And once again, that is going to mean that we have to put down a bunker tile here and here. And in fairness, we don't have that much steel, but we realistically want to do something like this and have that come all the way down so that nothing can come through on this right-hand side here. Again, that's one of the main reasons why we do need more steel. And so hopefully, let me go and check real quick. How is our new oil pump looking? It is not doing anything just yet, but that's because the game is paused. But essentially, we're going to have a little bit of petroleum along the bottom here. Now, to get that petroleum in, our best bet is probably going to be a bottle emptier. We don't really need that much petroleum. It's only a very small amount that needs to go along the bottom of this here. Now, of course, if we were to just try and pump petroleum onto here now, it would not do anything because the petroleum would just disappear into the vacuum that is space. But thankfully, the game does have drywall, which prevents gases and liquids from being lost to space. And so real quick, if we go ahead and grab that, and I don't really think it matters what we make it out of. There's nothing like super high here, like we can't make it out of steel or anything. So I guess we'll go with granite. It does have that plus 15% to overheat temperature, although I don't think there's a high likelihood that this is going to overheat. And then essentially what we're going to do is using radiant pipe, we're going to have a radiant pipe run along here. And then I think we're also going to have it run back along through the bottom as well, just to cool down both the petroleum and also all the items in the petroleum and also the window tile beneath it. And then thus, by proxy, cooling down the rubber miners as well, taking that heat away and hopefully deleting it with a thermal aqua tuner / steam turbine setup. Now, one thing that I did learn between episodes is that things can melt. And I was kind of aware already that things could melt, of course, but I didn't realize that anything in our base was actively melting. You may have noticed that multiple times we put down these guys, the space scanners, like here, here, and here, and I would always come back and they'd be destroyed. And I figured it was because too much regolith had fallen on them. Like if all of this regolith fell on it and it was like completely entombed, like maybe it would just get destroyed. Apparently that is not the case. I believe the reason that it was destroyed is that it melted. Like it actually just melted, because if you make it out of lead, it has a melting point of about 350, 327 maybe degrees Celsius. And so our space scanners were literally melting from the heat of the regolith. And so to counteract that, we of course have to make them out of steel. Thankfully, we do have enough steel to put 3 of these down like so. And so now, even if a ton of regolith falls onto this space scanner, the steel version, I think, has a melting point of over 1,000 degrees, 2,426.9 degrees Celsius. And so hopefully, under no circumstances should these melt. Now, that does also lead me to the next point, and that is that the radiant pipe that we're going to build almost certainly has to be made out of not lead, presumably gold, I think is what we're going to have to make it out of, especially for the top layer, the bit that the regolith is actually going to touch, because the regolith is still going to fall, and in these areas here where there's no tile above it, it is going to land on the petroleum and on the tile. And if 300 degree petroleum lands on a lead radiant pipe that can melt at 239 degrees Celsius, then that pipe's going to melt and it's going to be destroyed and the whole loop is going to stop working. Now, the good news is, though, that for all of the radiant pipe that is not on the surface, I'm fairly certain that we can get away with using lead. So, for example, coming from here around like this, and I think, let me think, how do I want to do this? The awkward part about this is that the system we have right now doesn't work to include this rubber miner. Now, eventually, we'll probably end up continuing this along to the left, right? We're pretty close to the right-hand side of the map here, so we probably won't go much further to the right, but we almost certainly will go further on to the left. And I think when we do that, we'll probably put down another tile right about here. I think even with a tile here, so long as this opens up, the telescope should have some access to the sky. And so I think what we'll end up doing is something like this. I'm not going to bother with this one for today. We'll do this when we do more of them in the future. For now, this guy is going to be the fastest to overheat, but at the same time, shouldn't get too hot too fast because of the fact that none of the regolith is getting anywhere near him. And I don't know how much the bunker doors transfer heat. Real quick, I'm going to change his tile to insulated tile just to slow down the heat transfer to this rubber miner. But for now, we're going to focus on these 4 over here. See if the system works, and if it does work, we can replicate it with yet more rubber miners all across the top of the map, right? So the lead pipe's already in there. I do want those to continue along, probably to like right about here, and then we're probably gonna have pipes come down here and then up underneath the transit tube. And so we can also have the pipe kind of go like this as well. And then we're going to use insulated pipe to kind of keep all of that heat in and not transfer it to our base as we head down and right down to wherever we're going to put our thermal aqua tuner, probably somewhere around here. But we'll get to that in just a second. Now, if we're going to make a ton of radiant pipe out of gold, we of course need quite a bit of gold. And right now we don't even have enough gold to make 1 radiant pipe. And that is where our good old friend, the metal refinery, comes back into play. Unfortunately, this is still not online. Is this a priority 5? It is. Let me bump that up to a priority 9 so that hopefully somebody will come and build that. And on top of that, I also don't think that I actually hooked this guy up with power either. And so we should probably go ahead and run this wire over through the water and just like with the liquid pipe, hook that up to our pump here to make sure this thing can actually run. Very temporary setup, very janky piping there, but hopefully that should get the job done. And again, I'm also going to bump everything up here to priority 8 as well. I would very much so like all of this to be done sometime this century, if possible. I will also dig out some of this as well. Now, another thing I did learn between episodes is that solar panels actually don't have to be placed on solid ground. Unlike a lot of the buildings in the game that will have a warning, for example, I think we have it over here, our thermal aquatuner currently doesn't have 2 blocks beneath it, and so it currently has the missing tile debuff, and this won't work. However, the solar panels don't need that. They can just float in the vacuum of space, and when it comes to overheating, if we just place these solar panels 1 or 2 tiles up, that way they're not touching anything, and so should never overheat, right? They don't generate any heat on their own, and if they're not touching a pre-existing tile that is also very hot, like these ones are right now, they should hopefully never overheat. And no regolith is going to fall through to it because we've got all of this window tile here. And so I am going to delete both of these, and then we're going to rebuild them a little bit higher up, probably here, here, and here. Now that I think about it, we should probably make our insulator tile here actually out of window tile. Mesh tile might also work. Does not obstruct liquid or gas flow. Let me test something real quick. This looks like it would allow light through. I'm going to put some mesh tile because if we go to the light overlay, by the way, you can see where light is. Right now, you'll see that light is not in this area because we're covered in regolith, and we've also got these bunker doors closed. But real quick, if I were to, for example, dig out up here and put down a mesh tile right about there, would that allow light to pass through it? It totally is, yeah. Okay, in that case then, I guess it shouldn't matter too much if this is insulated tile because it's not touching anything anyway, so it doesn't matter how hot this tile itself gets. And so I think in the interest of making our solar panels as efficient as possible, we will run mesh tile pretty much everywhere that's not touching machinery. So I think that should allow a lot more light to pass through. Thankfully, we shouldn't have to worry too much about this, although we could still have meteors coming in from the right-hand side there. We just have to deal with those as and when they come. But we'll bump up the priority on all of this. They've built all the drywall, which is good, and so now we can finally set this bottle emptier to petroleum. We could have run a liquid pipe and have a vent that, you know, dumped petroleum here, but as I mentioned before, we only need a very small amount of petroleum along the bottom, and so I think in the interest of saving on a massive pipe that goes from the bottom of the world to the top of the world, it might just be easier to put down a pitcher pump right about here and just have our duplicates come and manually grab some of this petroleum and take it right up to the surface. Now, this petroleum is already quite hot. That shouldn't matter too much because as soon as we put it down on the surface, it's going to start absorbing some of the heat from the regolith, which is 300 degrees Celsius, and it's going to get hot quickly anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much that it's not super cold. The reason we're using petroleum, by the way, is because it can get very hot before it turns into a gas and get up to like 550 degrees Celsius before it turns into sour gas. If we were to try and use something like water, for example, it just wouldn't work. The water would evaporate. Even polluted water with its higher evaporating point would still evaporate almost instantaneously when it comes into contact with, you know, 250 degree drywall or, you know, 300 degree regolith or anything like that. So the idea here is that we're going to have a thin layer of petroleum, which is essentially just going to act as an intermediary between the machines and the pipe. It's essentially just going to soak up the heat from the rubber miners and from the tile and from the regolith and transfer that heat into the radiant pipe. And then the radiant pipe is also itself going to have petroleum in it as well, for the same reason we don't want to have, you know, water evaporating or anything like that inside the tile. And so we're going to have a little bit of petroleum, or quite a lot of petroleum, I should say, in the loop that goes around and gets cooled by the thermal aquatuner. And so if we figure out where in the world we're going to put this thing, I kind of don't want to dig through the abyssalite here, and there is a lot of salt water here as well, which is also a bit of a pain to work with. I might build it actually right here. I do still have to dig through some abyssalite, but I think we also don't have to deal with the vacuum of space if we build it here underneath our rocket room. And so essentially, if we dig out something like this, all we're going to have, if I pause real quick here, is a thermal aquatuner, like so, and the thermal aquatuner is going to take in the petroleum and then output the petroleum at 14 degrees lower, and that's going to transfer the heat into the room around it. Now, the room around it is going to be a fairly small room, probably something looking a little bit like this, and the heat from that thermal aquatuna is going to be transferred into water, which we're then going to turn into steam. That steam is then going to be sent through into a steam turbine, like so. And unfortunately, the steam turbine is 5 tiles wide, whereas the aquatuna is only 2, so we can't have this central in any way. Now, this is not perfect by any means, because the perfect ratio, I believe, is 3 thermal aquatunas to 2 steam engines. Now, to do that would require 3,600 watts of power for the 3 thermal aquatunas. Now, and while it would be very good at cooling, much better than what we're going to set up today, it would also require a ton of power that we just don't have right now. And so this setup should work just fine. However, it will be a little less efficient than it could be. But essentially, if we do this, the steam from here will be sent through into the steam turbine. The steam turbine will then turn that steam into water. The reason we're doing that is because the steam turbine takes in steam at anywhere up to 200 degrees Celsius. It can take in steam above 200 degrees Celsius, but you're not getting any benefit over that. Essentially, the way it works is it takes in steam, for example, at 150 degrees Celsius, and it outputs water at around 90 degrees Celsius. And so it essentially deletes heat from the game whilst it's doing it. Now, a little bit of that heat is transferred out of the machine. About 10% of the heat that it deletes is emitted from the steam turbine itself, but on the whole, it actually does delete heat from the game, which is fantastic for us in our situation right now. It only deletes heat up to 200 degrees Celsius. Above 200 degrees Celsius, it outputs 100% of the heat that you put in it. So, for example, you can't put 500 degrees steam in here and expect to delete 400 degrees worth of heat. It will only work for steam under 200 degrees Celsius and delete that heat there. So ideally, we do want that steam to be as high as possible up to that 200 mark, but for the most part, so long as it keeps our thermal aquatuna cool, that's all that matters. All we really want to do here is make sure that our thermal aquatuna can run forever without overheating, the world around it. And the steam turbine should be able to do that. And we do want to make sure that the room stays full of water. We don't want to have to keep pumping water into it. And so what we can do is we can throw down a liquid vent right about here, and then we can have radiant pipe running around like this. The reason that we're using radiant pipe is the radiant pipe is going to allow us to cool down the steam turbine and also send that water back around to here, at which point it will then get heated up again by the thermal aquatuna, turn into steam, be used by the steam turbine, cooled down, turn into water, dumped back out, turn into steam, and the system will loop forever and ever, deleting some of the heat that is coming from our petroleum up in space. And hopefully this setup will actually allow us to work in space. That's the hope, at least. So we will, of course, have some more insulated tile around like so, and I might even go as far as to put a Wheezewort in here as well. I think I'll throw down a farm tile right about here just in case the steam turbine gets a little hot. I don't think it necessarily will. I think the steam turbine should be able to be cooled by the cold water running through it, but just to be a little bit on the safe side, we'll go ahead and do something like that, and hopefully this will work. Hopefully this will allow us to cool down the petroleum enough to keep space at bay. The trouble with space is that the meteor showers that come in are not regular in any way, shape, or form, and so we could have one cycle where like 4 meteor showers hits and it increases the temperature of the petroleum massively, and then we could have another 3 cycles where no meteor showers hit at all. And so I'm going to build this. I'm going to see how it works. What I might end up doing, if it seems like we do have bad days where things could potentially break, where the petroleum could potentially get over 500 degrees Celsius, what I might do is put a second thermal aquatuna in here, something like this, and set it up so that if the petroleum that's coming in is too hot, for example, if it's like at 500 degrees Celsius, then at that point have it go through both of them instead of going through one. So we're gonna have it go through one thermal aquatuna, and then if the temperature is still too hot, we could then have it go through a second thermal aquatuna. That way we don't always have to have 2 thermal aquatunas online all the time, but we can have a second one there just in case things get a little too hot. But that's a problem for the future. For now, I'm going to go away, I'm going to dig this out, I'm going to get this built, and I'll be back in just a second. And a little while later, we have something that looks a little bit like this. We've got our steam turbine, our Wheezewort, and our thermal aquatuna hooked up to an Atmos sensor, because I know for a fact that this one is going to work, unlike the one that we tried to place over here in space. I did learn between episodes that Atmos sensors just do not work in space, presumably because there's just no pressure at all, so there's no way for them to work, which kind of makes sense when you think about it, but I thought maybe in the logic of the game, the Atmos sensor would potentially work. Nevertheless, this one definitely does work and essentially allows us to toggle the thermal aqua tuner on and off without having to have a duplicate come and manually do it for us. So for example, right now, if the gas pressure is below 1,000, it will send a green signal. If we bring that up all the way to like 20,000, the signal will turn green and the thermal aqua tuner will not do anything because it doesn't currently have anything to cool. And that is where our petroleum comes in. And even though earlier in this very episode, I said that I didn't want to run a very long pipe right from the bottom of the base all the way to the top, I could not think of a better way or a more efficient way of getting this pipe here, this cooling loop, full of petroleum, because it's quite a long loop and ideally we would like it full of petroleum to maximize the amount of cooling that we can do. And so for that we have an insulated pipe that goes all the way down right past the entirety of the base and hooks up to our pre-existing line of petroleum, coming of course from our petroleum generation system down here. Now right now all of these pipes are set to priority 5, so I'm just going to quickly bump all of these up. I did have to do quite a few kind of twists and turns along the way because we do have quite a lot of pre-existing pipe, and I also had to like reconfigure some of the pre-existing pipe as well because we have quite a lot of like double pipe and you can't go across a double pipe with a bridge, and so I had to move some pipes, had to rework some things. But long story short, we now have what is going to be a petroleum pipe going all the way up to the top of the base, which will allow us to finally get this cooling loop underway. Now, whilst we wait for them to build that pipe, there are a few things up here that we still do not have taken care of. Number one is power. Right now, none of this stuff is powered, and it desperately needs to be. And so real quick, I'm going to delete a lot of the power cable that we don't need, like those two. We also don't need any of this anymore. I don't know if they're quite going to be able to reach that top power line there, but we can let them give it a go. I'd also like to delete this power wire, not because we don't need it, but because I don't want it connecting to this power wire here, because what we're going to do is we're going to have conductive wire connecting up all of our rubber miners and also all of our space scanners. Now, right away, I have made the rookie mistake of not checking the material that I build my power wires out of. It's a mistake that I've made so many times in the past, and then I get confused as to why my power wires are breaking. The reason is that they're melting because you're making them out of lead, Isaac. And so real quick, if we make these out of steel, it is expensive, but it should allow these kind of like outward facing wires to not melt when they come into contact with little bits of regolith, especially the ones that are connected up to the space scanners. Those are the ones that are most likely to break. Down here, we can switch back over to lead, like so. And then the same is probably true up here as well. We have a lot of conductive wire along the top here that's made of iron. Let me check real quick because I don't know what the melting point of iron is. It's 1,534 degrees Celsius. And so hopefully those wires should not melt. On the flip side, if we look down at, for example, oh, sorry, those are automation wires. The normal wires are made out of iron as well, which is good. So they still should have the same melting point. They do 1,534.9 degrees Celsius compared to the lead wires, which have a melting point of 327.5 degrees Celsius, significantly lower and very much so reachable when you're dealing with the heat of space. And so now that we've disconnected this wire over here, that is where our wire for the bunker doors is going to go. So we're going to run this all the way up like this. We'll probably go over and then up the ladder like that. And we do have to build a little bit of a ladder to actually connect that up, something like this. Just a very temporary ladder. We're not going to keep that in the long run there. But that should hopefully keep everything powered. One more thing that I did want to work on before we kind of come back up and try and finish up this space setup here is our current food. I was going to say predicament, but I don't know if it necessarily is a predicament. Right now we have 383,704 kilocalories worth of food, and it's almost entirely stuffed berries, which is exactly what we want our duplicates to be doing. But you'll notice that we have 2 full refrigerators of food, and our duplicates are still spending their time and energy making yet more food. And so I think what we should probably do here is, at the very least, stop having them make the food into stuffed berries. Stop wasting their time with that. You can do that with the automation on the fridges. If you hover over the output port here, it says sends a green signal when full, otherwise sends a red signal. And so I think what we should probably do, and it's going to be a little bit messy here because we already have this OR gate here for the light switch, but if we connect this up, I guess we want to set it up so that if both of these, so we want to have an AND gate right about here. Like I said, it's going to be a little janky, and we might actually end up just having to move some of this automation wire to make this work. I guess we don't, but like I say, it's going to be janky because I think we have to do this and then this to set that up. Sure, I guess it doesn't matter. So if we turn off the grill, the stove, is that what it's called? Or the gas range here will de facto also just be turned off because they can't make the stuffed berries if they don't have the gristle berries. And so if we just set it up to turn off the grill, I think that should work out. So we'll do this. We will have a not gate, of course, because right now when it's full, it'll send out a green signal. We want to make sure the signal is red. So we're going to change that green signal into a red signal and then have that go across and into the grill. So what should happen here is when both fridges are full, when either fridge is full, it's going to send a green signal up to here. When both of these ports are green, that's then going to output a green signal to the not gate. The not gate's going to change that into a red signal, and that red signal is going to turn off the grill. If either of these are not full, then this not gate will send out a red signal, which will be turned into a green signal by the not gate, which will allow them to use the grill. And so if both of these fridges are full, they should essentially stop making stuffed berries. They'll use however many bristleberries or gristleberries they have left, but after that, they will just stop making any more berries, which is exactly what we want. We don't want them spending all of their time making hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of kilocalories that our duplicants don't need. Right? So I'll bump all this up because right now he is doing exactly what we do not want him to be doing, which is making yet more food. The reason he's making yet more food is because all of this stuff is set to a super high priority, priority 9, because we do want it to be a high priority when we need food, but when we don't need food, we don't want it to be done at all. And I don't know if there's much we can do about the bristle blossoms. I guess we could also potentially look into some more advanced automation to where we disable the farm buildings if this is if these are full. That way we could make it so that they don't make any of the like micro fertilizer, the micronutrient fertilizer. That wouldn't stop them from farming, but it might slow down the growth rate of the bristle blossoms, hopefully, like a little bit. I did also put down the gold pipes as well. Those are now down and good to go. I'm also going to press Alt-Z real quick to speed all of this up just a little bit. But down here, we do have gold pipe running all the way along here. We got quite a little bit more in the way of gold now, which is always good. We're up to 2,825 kilograms of the gold stuff. And steel is also back being produced now up to 2,060 kilograms, which does remind me that I do still want to put down a couple more pieces of bunker tile. We need some here and here, which kind of negates the point of this bunker door here for all but this last tile. But we need this here to make sure no debris gets on this bit of mesh tile, because right now there is no rubber miner capable of deleting this. So we'll have that there, and then we'll have this run across by 2 and then down. It's very expensive stuff. 100 steel a time is quite pricey, but I think something like that should work out just fine. We'll also, of course, run some ladders up so they can actually build all of that stuff. And we're going to do a similar thing on this side. Once we're done with the wiring, we're going to put some more bunker tile here and here to stop these two tiles from getting anything on them, because once again, the robo miners cannot access them, and this regolith will just sit there forever and ever, which is, of course, not what we're after. They're almost there on the like thin pool of petroleum here. We've got the bottle emptier, and for whatever reason, we have like a ton of petroleum in our farm. Like, we don't have it now because they've moved it all, but we had a ton of canisters full of petroleum in these farm rooms here. Not quite sure how we managed to do that, but we managed it at some point. And I did also get rid of the pitcher pump for the petroleum tank down here because it just instantly overheated. Now, we are a little shy of having a full layer of petroleum up here. And so what I might do is have a little bit of the coolant that's coming around go into a liquid vent and just kind of fill up this bottom line here. We might also in the future have to set up a system that refills this petroleum, because as the regolith hits, like if regolith falls down from here onto here, it is going to destroy a little bit of that petroleum. Of course, it will level itself out after that, but every time the regolith hits, it will destroy a little bit of that petroleum. And so what we might want to look into doing is throwing down a hydro sensor, like right about here, to see how much petroleum there is, and then if the petroleum falls below a certain weight, we could then have a shut-off valve that brings in some of the petroleum from the cooling pipe and dumps it back into this bottom layer here. That way we could always have a little bit of petroleum along the bottom of the ground there. That would, of course, run into a further problem later on down the line, to where eventually the cooling loop would run out of petroleum. And so I'm thinking on that front, what we could probably do is have a liquid sensor, aka one of these, a liquid pipe element sensor, on one of our liquid pipes, connect that up to a buffer gate, and if there is, for example, no liquid in the pipe for 30 seconds, then we could have another shutoff valve that brings in petroleum from this line that we already have here. So there are a couple of things we could do to make sure that it all works well and all continues to operate functionally going forward here, but that is a problem for the future. For now, we're just going to set up the basics and see if the system actually works. finally, the petroleum is moving. It's on its way up to the thermal aquatuna, and hopefully we should start to see this system kick into gear. It is going to take quite a while for the steam or the water in this room to heat up to steam to 104 degrees Celsius, I think it is, or thereabouts. But before that happens, we should hopefully, let's go ahead and turn that on. I was wondering why that's not working there, but it needs to be initiated. We should hopefully, before that happens, see the results of cooling. This is already quite cool on its way up here. It's lost a lot of its heat on the way up through the base, but hopefully we'll see the temperature of these rubber miners come down. Right now they're a whopping 253 degrees Celsius. Right away they're coming right down. So much of that heat is being taken away and absorbed into the petroleum there. The temperature is coming down rapidly, and hopefully that's what we're going to see over and over again over time here. Now we do want to make sure that as the petroleum gets towards the end here, that we get like a priority high deletion on this. Yeah, we want it deleted before the petroleum loop fully fills up. It is heading back down now, so that's going to slowly make its way back down into the petroleum generator, I think, because they're both hooked up to the same line. That's probably a bigger gap than we'd like in our loop, but for now, I think that's fine. I don't think that's a problem at all. And so, as there are no meteors, the petroleum is going to loop round and around, getting colder and colder. I don't know how cold it can get. Let me check the wiki here. Petroleum, how cold before it freezes? Negative 57. So I don't foresee it getting that cold, hopefully. It is going to heat up quite rapidly as soon as we release the top here and let all of the waste fall in. But it would probably be a sensible idea for us to actually hook this up in such a way that if it's too cold, it forgoes the thermal aquatuna. That would probably make a lot of sense. Now, I can't help but notice that these guys don't have power. That is because this has not been built. That is because all of these are set to a very low priority. So let's bump all of this up a little bit and try and get that actually taken care of. Once that is online, we should hopefully see these bunker doors open up. But that's actually not true because to get the bunker doors to open up, we of course have to actually hook them up to automation wire. And although it looks a little janky, I think I will hook it up to the pre-existing wire here. And we do of course need a NOT gate of some description. So we'll have a NOT gate that goes probably right about here. Sure, let's put it here, I guess. Let's hide it a little bit. And let's have this guy right here connect up, making sure that we're not using lead because lead will overheat and destroy itself. So we'll use steel to connect up to here. And then from there, connect up to here. Hopefully this stuff won't destroy itself. It might. If we do have to rebuild it, we'll just rebuild it out of lead. We will of course set all of that to priority 9. And I think what we'll probably end up doing here is having 2 of these space scanners dedicated to scanning for meteor showers, and then maybe 1 of these space scanners dedicated to scanning for rockets coming back. Because what we do want to be able to do is eventually have a system over here, a similar setup with the rubber miners and the space scanners. Oh my goodness, there it goes. All right. Now, one thing I didn't do here, which I definitely do need to do for the future, is I need to hook up the automation wire to this guy. So we need to do something like this. But the system is working. You'll see the rubber miners do get hot. They climb up to well over 200 degrees Celsius. Thankfully, the space scanners never overheat. They will melt if they hit 2000 degrees Celsius, which they might eventually if they keep taking heat like this. But I think, once they get hot enough, they'll start transferring heat to the regolith, right? So I think this should work. You'll see we've got a nice smooth layer of petroleum along the bottom. All of the miners are doing their job here, which is all good. We do need to delete these ladders here and put down the steel tile that we were going to put in the top left here. But this, I think, is doing just fine. You'll see we're hovering around 200 degrees now. Again, the system's going to work in the same way as it always does. It's going to cool down when the meteors are not hitting, and it's going to heat up when the meteors start hitting, and then cool down in its cooldown period. The real question is if it can cool down enough in that cooldown period to offset how much it heats up in its heat up period. If the answer is yes, then the system will be fine. It should continue to work as it's doing right now. If not, we might have to add in another thermal aquatuna or figure out some other kind of system to accompany the system we have right now. But only time will tell. Right now, we just have to wait and see what happens and hope that it all goes to plan. I will bump up the priority on this dig so we can get this up and running. I do want to put these bunker tile in. I want to make sure that gets done before the end of the episode because hopefully after today, we can just kind of leave this and call it a day. We do have to dig out this here, but hopefully we can just leave this set up and it will work just fine, right? That's the hope, that's the dream. The reason that we needed to hook up this, of course, is that once, and again, I will set that to priority 9, once we have the telescope here, we don't want that regolith falling on the telescope like it just did. What we instead want to happen is we want the buffer gate here to buffer the open door signal. Now, I did this before and it didn't work. The reason for that is that I did this the wrong way around. If you're going to set up something like this, you want to make sure that the NOT gate is specifically after the buffer gate, because the buffer gate has a very specific use. I thought that it would just buffer any signal. So if it was red, it would buffer the red. If it was green, it would buffer the green. That's not how it works. If you read it, it says send a green signal when receiving green. So no matter what, if you send a green signal, it will just pass that green signal right on through. There's no delay, no nothing. After receiving a red signal, it will continue sending a green signal until the timer has expired. So it will only delay changing from green to red. And so because we want our door to be delayed, we have to set the NOT gate after the buffer gate so that the signal coming from here will be green if there's a meteor shower coming. And then when it turns red to indicate that there's no longer a meteor shower, you don't have to worry, it will then buffer that red signal, allowing all of the rubber miners to get rid of the regolith before the door actually opens up. Right now I have it set to 100 seconds, I think. Let me see if I can grab it here real quick. Oh, 200 seconds. I think we can bring that down to maybe like 100 seconds. We can, of course, keep an eye on it. If it's too low, we can always change it and open it back up again. But I think now we should be pretty safe to throw down our telescope right about here. I will, of course, make it out of steel just to be on the safe side. And I will also replace the tile underneath it out of insulated tile as well, because there is still the chance that some of this hot regolith does end up heating up the telescope. There's not much that we can do about that just yet. We could try and do some shenanigans with auto sweepers in the future, but for now, we might have to just settle with potentially replacing the telescope every now and again. For the most part, though, I think this setup is going to work pretty well. I think it's doing a pretty good job. Hopefully it will continue to do a pretty good job as we progress on through the game here. They can't delete that, Isaac, you fool, because there's no ladder to get to it. So real quick, let me priority 9 some ladders here. And then let's also go ahead and we only need the one bunker tile, and it just needs to be here. So as soon as they've deleted that, we can put that there. It does look a little janky, but it will work. It'll stop any regolith falling here or here, which is the intended purpose. And everything else on here should just continue to work. You'll see these were up at like 250 degrees Celsius. They're slowly but surely coming down to close to 200. They should hopefully dip below 200. Ideally, they never go above 275. That's the temperature at which they overheat. But again, only time will tell. Now, we seemingly have lost a lot of kilocalories. What in the world? We had 300,000 kilocalories not mere moments ago. And now suddenly we are having troubles with our irrigation? So, did I break a water pipe that needs to be here? The water's still coming in this way. The water should be being sieved. It's a waiting filtration material, I see. Let me bump that up to a priority 9 so the water sieve can start doing its job once again. The thing that's baffling most to me, though, is just how fast we ran out of food. Like, we went from 300,000 kilocalories down to 80,000 extraordinarily quickly. Oh my goodness. I did set up a little bit of automation here as well. I put down some wire, basically connecting up the same wire from the grill over to the farm stations here, so that, as I mentioned earlier, if we have too much food, they'll stop trying to make the micronutrient fertilizer and stop fertilizing all the plants. But yeah, that was wild. We lost so much food so fast. Either way, now that we've got the water sieve back online, everything should hopefully be back to how it should be. We've definitely got more than enough water at this moment in time. We've still got a ton down here that needs to be filtered. We've got a pipe that's backed up going all the way up here. We've got, I think, just a ton of polluted water. Like, these are all full of polluted water. And as you saw earlier, we've got a bunch of water up here as well. And so, between episodes, guys, I'm going to hopefully do what I tried to do between this episode and the last episode, and that is replicate this system here with the steam turbines and the thermal aquatuner, turning the steam from our core steam vent into water and then piping that water down, which hopefully we will use in the next episode to actually set up an oil well and start producing a reliable and consistent amount of petroleum, because right now, as you'll see, our petroleum supplies are depleting quite rapidly, and so hopefully we can get that under control with our oil well and oil reservoir in the next episode. But for now, as always, if you did enjoy the video and you want to see more oxygen not included in the future, be sure to go ahead and hit that like button. It really does help out a lot. Leave a comment down below, subscribe if you're new here to get notified as soon as new videos go out. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.